How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. You know, back when I was in high school, I believe a sophomore, I had a 1999 Jeep Grand Cherokee WJ with a 4.7 liter. And that was the biggest piece of crap that I've pretty much ever owned. Unreliable, electrical problems, and here I am, almost 10 years later, buying another Jeep that's a piece of crap. And I realized I haven't really bought anything different. I've still been buying crappy cars. I've just learned how to pay less for them. Now, this Jeep, I've only paid $400 for at a yard sale. 1987 Jeep Cherokee with 168,000 miles. And it has sat since 2015. It's the Pioneer trim model. So it has the retro burgundy and white plaid seats. You can tell it was driven by a college girl because it has Tinkerbell floor mats. The headliner's sagging, but the rest of the interior just needs a really deep cleaning. It's sat for a long time, like I said, but that's the worst part of the entire interior. Maybe this one cigarette burn here, but the rest of the interior is pretty much clean and good to go. Power windows and locks. Doesn't have a tachometer, which I don't personally like, but the rest of it is all there. Back seat, nothing really be proud of, but what do you want for an 87 Jeep? The clear coat has seen way better days. It is almost gone, and it's missing the 4x4 emblem, so we'll have to fix that. But here's proof that it's sat since 2015. But it even has the rear tire cover, which I think is pretty rare. You probably don't see many of those on Jeeps nowadays, with a really cool small donut spare. That's pretty neat. Nice little wasp nest that came with the vehicle for free. That's gonna have to be replaced. But it's original Jeep wheels. Replaced the brakes and the tires before it was sold to me back in 2015. And now the engine bay. The engine bay, I mean, it hasn't been touched. It's just been a time capsule since 2015. The battery box is made out of wood. The battery cables are pretty much toast. They'll work, but barely any coolant. There's nothing in the reservoir. There's just some right at the bottom of this tube. The oil is rusty, and I'll go over that in a minute. No power steering fluid, no washer fluid. The brake fluid is black. And then I'm missing a bunch of hoses, and I don't know where this hose goes, and this hose looks like it would go in this hose, but I don't know what's going on here. But the only good thing about this interior is it has a electric fan with the mechanical fan blade here off the clutch, so should have better cooling capability. So for 400 bucks, I think I did okay. Got it towed to my house for 160 bucks. So after taxes, licenses, getting all the parts I need to fix this thing, I'm about $800 in the Jeep so far. So let me go underneath and show you why this thing sat for 8 years. So even if you're not mechanically inclined and you don't know anything about vehicles, you can probably tell that this doesn't look right. Now, the story that was given to me by the previous owner, the college girl that drove this to work and back every day, was she was driving real slow down the road and the drive shaft just fell out. Now, usually drive shafts don't just fall out of vehicles. There's a reason behind it. And let me spin you around 180 degrees. Now, this is the rear axle, and this is the Dana 35. It looks like the U-joint is still here. The caps are on the yoke, and so my theory is that the drive shaft U-joint was really, really wore out, and just not long for this world before it broke, and the U-joint sheared off. You can tell when this U-joint sheared off, the drive shaft just whipped around still and hit the bottom of the body of the Jeep, so it just went thump 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 and smacked the body a couple times. And then coming back up here to the transfer case, there's supposed to be a tail shaft here going over this output shaft, and that was the only thing holding the drive shaft on at this point. And because of the force and the drive shaft whipping around, the tail shaft just couldn't hold up to the pressure, to the force of that drive shaft whipping around, and so it broke the tail shaft off. Luckily, I think the output shaft of this transfer case is okay. It looks good. The only thing is automatic transmission fluid is constantly going around because there's a pump inside here, just like you would have in an automatic transmission, and it's pumping fluid to this bearing. And so what she did was she put it in 4-wheel drive, limped it home, and I think possibly, I haven't checked, but could have ran this transfer case dry, and the transfer case could just be grenaded inside. I don't know. I doubt it, because the NP231 transfer cases here are pretty tough. It's about as good as it gets for a Jeep, but still, it's not promising. Last thing before I get started here, I just want to be honest with you guys and say I've never attempted to start this truck or Jeep since I've owned it. The previous owner tried to start it. The battery was dead, so nothing even turned over. I'm glad it didn't, because the oil's pretty rusty. There's condensation all the way up on this dipstick tube, and so I'll have to flush out that oil. But I'm really glad it didn't turn on, because I didn't want that rusty oil maybe damaging a crankshaft bearing or something. So this has truly never been turned on since 2015. It's a true will it start video. I gotta add a battery. I have an old diesel battery laying around that I think will work fine for this. It's just a matter of fitting it in this compartment area. So yeah, I'm gonna clean up this engine bay and we'll get started. I don't think the camera footage caught just how dirty this engine bay really was. In every nook and cranny in that engine bay, there was either a wasp's nest, a spider web, leaves, junk, not to mention the old wooden battery tray that someone tried to fabricate. So I just wanted to start fresh, get some engine degreaser on that valve cover, clean it as much as I could up before I started getting underneath the vehicle, and it was worth it. All right, so it's several days later, and the Jeep is finally dried off. Now, I had to push it into my garage because we're refinishing our driveway, but there's enough room in here to work on it, and hopefully the lighting's good enough. It's in the middle of the day, so it should be fine. Now, let me go over the vacuum hoses here, because someone did a pretty shoddy job trying to delete all the hoses. Now, this is an 87. Now, for Jeep, this is the first year they put this motor in the XJ, and they had a ton of vacuum lines that mounted right here. Now, they only did this for a couple years, from my understanding. I'm not a Jeep guy, but all these hoses, according to Dormant, there's two sections to this housing here. There's parts that come into here, and then the vacuum lines that come out. And someone put screws in here to block them off, and you can tell they put like some sort of sticky tape on. And when I was cleaning the valve cover, this hose here broke off, and I think it fits into there. So also this PCV hose, I think someone tried to put into this rubber hose that they zip tied to the frame. So there's a lot going on there, and it's not perfect. I am going to replace those parts. You can get them, you get replacement Dormant parts for less than 60 bucks, but I don't think it'll stop me from starting up the Jeep today. All right, well, I guess I'll start with the boring thing and get into this air cleaner. You know, with all the wasp nests that have been living in here, it wouldn't surprise me if something got through. Maybe a mouse too. All right, so nothing in here, but the filter looks like it's collapsed. I mean, yeah, I probably could have reused that, but I'll just put a fresh one in. Can't hurt, right? Okay, air filter, done. All right, so first things first, this hose I think is just dangling here because someone tried to reroute the PCV hose around the side of the frame, which is stupid in my opinion. You can see I don't know if that picks up on camera, but oil's coming out of here, and it blew a hole in it, probably because it got too hot. So I don't know what that's all about. Someone trying to save 0.3 horsepower. I guess it's a Jeep thing. I'm really curious to see what this oil's like. Let's just hope it's black engine oil, huh? Look at that, just chunks of crap are falling off. Ugh. You gotta love the 80s. All right. Looks like it's just black. Oh, here's the magnet. Doesn't look like anything was on the magnet, guys, so that's really encouraging. All right, guys, time for 6 quarts of 15 or 10W30. All right, 6 quarts, done. Okay, so the battery tray is in, and the positive cable looks, it's okay. The ground here looks not okay, but I'll put some electrical tape on there and maybe a little bit of wire loom. But what's bad is all the way back here. I don't know if this is picking up on camera. I'm trying to get you the best lighting, but right here where the oil filter is, there is a lot of exposed wire. This is the ground wire for the battery, and I'm not real impressed with it. It's just, it's all cracked and the rubber is just crumbly. So I'm gonna put some electrical tape over there and some more wire loom for sure in that spot, and possibly on the end here. Okay, new problem. So while I was reaching down here to get some electrical tape on this ground wire, this hose on me split, and it looks like a heater hose that goes somewhere to, I don't know, it's coming out of here, out of the coolant reservoir, and this is going right to the thermostat. So I'm guessing this right here is, yeah, it's a heater core hose. You can see the direction. So this goes to the fan, this comes away. It looks like it's vacuum actuated too. Well, I'm finding all sorts of fun things wrong with this Jeep. So not only is this heater hose control valve broken, and the ground wire is, all the wire loom is breaking off of it, but also the positive wire too. Both the negative and positive wires, their looms are just crumbling to pieces. So with enough driving, those would have shorted out for sure and possibly could have started a fire. So it's ridiculous. So it took a little time, but I think it's sure worth it to be safe. Skipping ahead here, got these 2 wires isolated now. They both have their own wire looms. I didn't tape all the way up here because I still wouldn't be able to identify this wire, you know, leave the red case around this wire so I know it's positive, if that made sense to me. Now that the wires are taken care of, it's time to replace this heater control valve. Now it runs off a vacuum line here and just actuates this diaphragm. So it snapped right here, right where the fitting was, and it's crazy. Just touching this Jeep has already cost me $100. I now understand why Jeep stands for just empty every pocket. In some ways, I'm thankful this failed now than when I was going down the road 60 miles an hour and this thing blows out and throws coolant all over the engine bay, or worse, overheats the Jeep. So it's not all bad. It's just kind of sucks that it costs $50 for a part that probably cost 2 cents to make over in China. So pull that vacuum line off. This should just spin right out. Now, I don't know if it was supposed to be like that, that little screen. It looks all clogged up. See how the diaphragm was compared to the new one. Oh yeah, this diaphragm was way too easy to press. So maybe the heater will work better now. I don't know. So 2 things. I could do a hack job and just cut off these compression fittings and just hope I have enough length of hose to put the new pieces in. Or I think what I'm going to do is get a rubber hose that's this size and replace this entire hose that goes to the thermostat housing here. And I'll just use hose clamps here on the end because that's what everything else is. I mean, this is a hose clamp. Everything at the thermostat housing is a hose clamp, so I don't see why using a hose clamp here would be a bad thing. Well, that's not great news. I don't know if you can see that on camera, but it's kind of glittery. So this is the old heater control unit, and this is the stuff that's coming out of it. Now, it would make sense that someone tried to use a stop leak product. That's what all that metallic glitter is in the coolant and this fibrous material. I thought that was some sort of filter for this, but this is supposed to be a completely open passage. So someone tried stop leak here, but yeah, that's not a good sign. All right, all the hoses are back on. The oil's right where it should be, and I was able to shoehorn the 65 group battery. But let's just see what happens here. Are sparks gonna fly, or is it gonna be okay? All right, it's been laying dormant for 8 years. Let's see if we'll just, I don't want to start the vehicle, but let's see if we got voltage. How about that? So we're low on voltage because the battery was weak. That's to be expected. And we have about, if this is accurate, about a quarter tank or so. It's slowly climbing up. The brake light works. Even the old 80s clock works. That's pretty cool. I'm gonna do it one more time here. I don't know if you heard that on camera, but the fuel pump in the tank is working. This thing might run, guys. I was playing around with the radio, and it actually works. It's a nice little Kenwood head unit. But this thing, the CD popped out when I was pushing buttons, and I guess I need to name the Jeep John. So part of me just wanted to run this fuel. I didn't really want to siphon it out. I thought if I mixed good fuel with the old fuel here, it'd be fine, but better safe than sorry. So this is a 20-gallon tank, and when I turned on the vehicle, the gas gauge said about a quarter. So roughly, let's say 5-6 gallons of fuel is in here. And I'm gonna try and get out as much as I can and put in some fresh fuel and some fuel treatment before I put on the new fuel filter. All right, so onto the transfer case. And I managed to get about 3 gallons or so of fuel out of the tank. So everything's going along pretty well. Now, this is kind of critical that there be fluid in here, because if not, that means this bearing up here was run dry on the way home, and who knows how fast that bearing would give out without fluid cooling it down and keeping it lubricated. Moment of truth, whether the transfer case is okay or possibly needs replacement. Jeez. Well, looks like that's all that was left, guys, and it's pretty gross too. But yeah, this was almost run dry. I mean, and that might even qualify as being run dry, guys, you tell me. But well, after trying to use a funnel to pour it in and a siphon pump, which didn't work at all, remembered I had this in my toolbox. I think I got these at Walmart for like $2. Just screws onto any quart size oil bottle. Man, I'm gonna buy like 10 of these when I'm done. All right, last thing. Fuel filter. You know, guys, when I took out that gas, it looked okay. I thought it was just gonna be pure jelly, like Vaseline, but it was actually in okay shape. It just smelled real varnished. Who knows what that would have done to the fuel injectors, but if you were really struggling and you need that Jeep right now, taking a fuel treatment probably would have solved it. Crap. Oh gosh, that gas smells like paint thinner. I take it all back. That was not okay to run in the Jeep. All right, so that was 4.5 gallons. That'll be enough to get it started. All right, so first thing I want to do is hear that fuel pump go. Yep, there it goes. I'm just going to do this a couple times to kind of prime the pump, the filter, I mean. Oh yeah, and one last thing. Zane taught me to always have one of these. Let's try it. Okay. So what's on fire? Well, this is smoking, so that's not good. I'm almost out of battery life, but yeah. I heard a sucking noise, like it's I'm hearing a vacuum leak. That's obvious. I mean, I got so many vacuum hoses leaking here, but I had over 40 pounds of oil pressure. I think it was like 50 or 60. And everything else looked good on the gauge, so the engine's running fine. It just took some time to build up that oil as well as the fuel from changing out the oil and fuel stuff. And the alternator was charging too. The alternator had well over 13 volts, so I guess I have a couple things to sort out. Let's try it one more time. I don't know if you guys can pick up on that smoke that's coming off. I don't know if that's like the degreaser that I shot when I was cleaning the engine bay, but just to be safe, I'm gonna let it sit for a little bit. But the Jeep runs. That's insane. All right, so it's the next morning. I had to cut it short because the battery died on me and I had a really bad fuel leak, but the engine runs amazing. There's a couple vacuum lines, like I said earlier, that are missing, that are making some weird noises, but once I replace those, I think it's like $60 for a whole set. It's going to be in tip-top shape. So let me put this thing in four-wheel drive, because there's no rear drive shaft, of course. And let's see if it'll move forward and back just in the garage here. One last thing before I start it up. I just wanted to say that the new fuel filter that came from AutoZone had a smaller outlet port than what came from the factory. And so the rubber hose that used to connect the fuel filter to the fuel line was too big. I was constantly getting fuel leaking out of there, and not only that, but this fuel line ruptured because it was so old. So got that replaced. It took me all night off camera to finally figure out what was going on, but there's no leaks back there, no transfer case leaks. I think there's a power steering leak, but it's just doing amazing right now. So let's see if it'll run. Oh, and it stopped smoking because I think that degreaser that I used to clean the engine bay just burned off, and so it's getting better and better. Well, the transmission feels really, really smooth. I forgot I had the e-brake on my first go around forward and back, so that's why it wasn't going anywhere. I thought there was something wrong with the transmission. I was just being an idiot. So e-brake works pretty well. I haven't heard it shift out of first gear, of course, but at least the four-wheel drive works. We'll see when I put on that rear drive shaft, but that's pretty cool. So guys, that's going to be it for this week's video. The Jeep runs pretty well for being dormitory for 8 years. Now there's a couple vacuum lines and some vacuum harnesses that I'm gonna have to buy. Those haven't come yet, so I'm gonna cut the video off here. When those parts come, I'll make another video on that. And then I have to get the drive shaft in the transfer case there, but the yoke is so jacked up, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to reuse it or if I have to get a new yoke, so that'll be a separate issue for another day. But the Jeep runs, it runs amazing. You know, it's pretty cool. Growing up, I always watched like Fred Williams from Dirt Every Day with his cheap truck challenge, where he'd buy these like really cheap Jeeps for less than $2,000 and go off in the mountains and have fun with it. And growing up, I'd always wanted these Jeeps, wanted one to kind of off-road myself. And even though that was like 10 years ago and I've kind of grown up now and I don't really think off-roading is that fun of a hobby, it's still pretty fun to wrench on one of these old Jeeps and see it come back to life. It's kind of a long time bucket list item for me. So this Jeep is probably gonna be sold once I'm done with it. I don't have any use for it because I have my Explorer, but it's still a pretty good runner for anyone who would want to use it because everything on it pretty much works for the most part. So guys, thanks so much for watching. Stay tuned for next week's video. If you liked the video, hit that like button, subscribe if you're not already subscribed to the channel, and I'll see you in the next one, guys. Take care.